The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has prompted the European Union (EU) and the United States to impose severe sanctions on Russia, particularly targeting institutions like Gazprom Bank. These sanctions are designed to penalize Russia, but they also carry risks for the EU, threatening both its energy supply and economic stability. Recent discussions between the EU and the US to ease these sanctions highlight the growing concern over Europe's energy crisis and the delicate balance between political objectives and economic needs. Gazprom Bank plays a crucial role in processing payments for Russia's natural gas exports to Europe. US sanctions on this bank have created uncertainty about the reliability of gas deliveries. Despite President Vladimir Putin's allowance for foreign buyers to use other banks, financial and legal complexities still make it difficult for European energy companies and governments to maintain gas flows while adhering to sanction rules. The situation worsened when Bulgaria threatened to stop the transit of Russian natural gas through its territory, a move that could have widespread consequences for regional energy security. This threat comes amid mounting difficulties caused by US sanctions on Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy giant, and its financial intermediary, Gazprom Bank. These sanctions have complicated payment processes for gas transit, making an already fragile energy situation even more precarious. Bulgaria has taken a firm stance, with Energy Minister Vladimir Malinov stating that the country's gas grid operator, Bulgartransgaz, will not permit gas transit unless payments are fully compliant with existing contracts. The core of the issue lies in the reliance on Gazprom Bank, now under sanctions, to handle payments for the Turk Stream pipeline, which runs through Bulgaria. This pipeline is a vital link in Europe's energy network, carrying about 18 billion cubic meters of gas annually to countries like Serbia and Hungary, as well as other nations in the Western Balkans. The timing of this energy crisis is particularly critical as Europe braces for increased energy demand during the winter. Any disruptions to gas flows could worsen supply shortages, causing ripple effects in energy markets and driving up prices for both consumers and businesses. While Bulgaria has so far received payments for transit services, the impending US sanctions, set to take full effect on December 20th, have heightened the urgency of finding a resolution. Without an alternative payment mechanism, halting the transit of gas becomes increasingly likely. The EU's reliance on Russian energy imports has significant economic consequences. Energy is a major part of the EU's imports, and disruptions or higher costs can lead to increased production expenses for businesses, higher prices for consumers, and greater economic pressure overall. Industries that rely heavily on energy may face reduced production, potentially leading to job losses and slower economic growth. Additionally, alternative energy sources like liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the US are often more expensive than Russian pipeline gas, exacerbating inflation and reducing purchasing power in the EU. Sanctions on Gazprom Bank have not only impacted energy transactions, but have also created uncertainty within the financial sector. European banks are reluctant to engage with Gazprom Bank for fear of violating US sanctions, which makes energy deals more difficult to arrange. This hesitation can delay investments in energy infrastructure and further prolong the energy crisis. Moreover, complex payment channels, such as using subsidiaries in Luxembourg, have added to the uncertainty, with financial institutions needing to navigate these issues carefully to avoid fines. These factors have disrupted the energy market and slowed down transactions. In response to the severe energy crisis, the EU and US are reconsidering their stringent sanction policies. Policymakers now recognize that continuing sanctions on Gazprom Bank may jeopardize energy security and economic stability. As a result, they are exploring ways to ease or adjust these measures. Potential solutions include allowing payments through alternative channels or subsidiaries, which could reduce financial barriers in gas transactions without completely lifting the sanctions. This shift reflects a practical understanding that political and economic priorities must be balanced. While the EU and US remain committed to punishing Russia for its actions in Ukraine, the urgent need for reliable and affordable energy in Europe calls for a more flexible approach. As winter sets in, Europe faces additional challenges. Northwest Europe is bracing for colder than usual temperatures, which will strain energy systems as gas storage is rapidly depleted after a relatively mild week. Countries like Germany and France are particularly vulnerable as demand for heating spikes. At the same time, low wind activity has limited renewable energy production, increasing reliance on gas for electricity. These pressures have driven gas prices up by about 50% this year. As US sanctions on Gazprom Bank come into full effect on December 20th, countries in Europe that depend heavily on Russian gas find themselves in an increasingly complex energy situation. The sanctions imposed on Russia in 2024, aimed at crippling the nation's military funding, have created significant challenges for several European countries, including Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria. These nations have long-term contracts with Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy giant, and the new restrictions are disrupting their payment systems. This disruption poses a risk to energy stability across Europe, especially as the continent braces for one of its coldest winters in recent years. In this video, we will delve into the current conflict between Russia and several European countries, the impact of Russia's decision to halt gas supplies, and the new sanctions placed on Gazprom by the United States. These sanctions could severely curtail Russia's ability to export gas to Europe, creating further uncertainty in the energy market. We will also examine the potential consequences of this new development for Europe, as countries like Hungary, Slovakia, and Austria struggle to adapt to a rapidly changing energy landscape. Hungary, in particular, is concerned about potential interruptions in gas flows through Ukraine, which serves as a vital transit route for Russian gas into Europe. Slovakia is seeking alternative solutions to ensure its continued supply of natural gas, while Austria faces increasing pressure after one of its major energy providers, OMV, ceased payments to Gazprom. Additionally, Turkey, a key distributor of Russian gas through the Turk Stream pipeline, is negotiating with the US for possible exemptions, allowing it to continue using Gazprom's bank for transactions involving European gas markets. With European gas futures reaching some of their highest levels in a year, nations across the continent are exploring alternative measures to manage their energy needs. These strategies include rerouting payments through sanctioned Russian banks, or seeking special licenses from the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, to facilitate energy-related transactions. Proposals to mitigate the sanctions include offering specific waivers for clients or renegotiating contracts with Gazprom. However, these measures could lead to lengthy legal disputes, further complicating an already tense situation. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which began in February 2022, has deeply strained the energy relationship between Russia and the European Union. Russia, which once supplied nearly 40% of the EU's natural gas, has seen its role dramatically reduced due to sanctions and the EU's accusations of Russia using energy as a geopolitical weapon. The Nord Stream pipeline, which was once a major source of Russian gas for Europe, has experienced significant reductions in supply and was eventually shut down entirely. In response to this, the EU accelerated efforts to diversify its energy sources. This shift involved ramping up imports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the US and Qatar, as well as investing heavily in renewable energy projects. Despite these efforts, the transition has not been without challenges. Market instability caused by the changing geopolitical landscape has driven gas prices to unprecedented levels. In 2022, gas prices soared to over $300 per megawatt hour, leading to a sharp rise in inflation and negatively impacting both households and industries across Europe. This trend has continued into 2024, with natural gas prices spiking amid renewed geopolitical tensions. On November 22, 2024, the benchmark Dutch TTF futures rose by 2.61%, reaching 46.86 per megawatt hour, reflecting concerns over potential disruptions in supply. These developments come at a time when Ukraine has deployed advanced missile systems against Russian targets, and the agreement governing Russian gas transit through Ukraine is set to expire. This situation has the potential to exacerbate supply shortages, further driving up prices. In the UK, the energy regulator Ofgem recently announced an increase in the energy price cap by £21, reflecting higher wholesale gas costs driven by political instability and extreme weather. This increase pushes the average annual household energy bill to £1,738, demonstrating the broader economic impact on European consumers. Looking at the long history of Russia's energy relationship with Europe, we can trace the roots of the current crisis back to the Cold War era. Energy trade between the Soviet Union and European countries began to take shape in the late 1960s, with Austria emerging as a leading importer of Soviet gas. The Druzhba pipeline, operational since 1964, was one of the first major routes designed to supply oil to Eastern Bloc allies. Similarly, the Urengoy-Pomary-Uzhhorod pipeline, built between 1982 and 1984, played a crucial role in supplying natural gas to Europe from Soviet reserves. Over the decades, Russia became a central player in Europe's energy market, with many European nations depending on Russian gas for heating, power generation, and industrial use. However, the geopolitical tensions that have unfolded in recent years, particularly with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have significantly altered these long-standing energy relations. The EU's efforts to reduce its dependence on Russian energy have reshaped the region's energy dynamics, leading to increased energy costs, heightened uncertainty, and greater urgency in finding alternative energy sources. As we continue to navigate this complex energy crisis, European nations are being forced to find innovative solutions to ensure their energy security. The decisions made in the coming months will be crucial in shaping the future of energy trade between Russia and Europe, with far-reaching implications for both the global energy market and the daily lives of consumers across the continent. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union significantly increased its gas exports to Western Europe, making Soviet gas a critical part of energy consumption in countries such as Germany and France. By the early 1980s, the United States, under the leadership of President Ronald Reagan, became increasingly concerned about Europe's growing dependence on Soviet energy supplies. The U.S. feared that such reliance would boost the Soviet Union's political and economic influence in Western Europe. Despite these concerns, and despite efforts by the U.S. to halt the construction of gas pipelines, including imposing restrictions on the sale of equipment and supplies for pipeline construction, the pipeline project continued. By the end of the 1980s, the pipeline was completed, which led to a significant increase in Russian natural gas exports to Europe. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the energy trade between Russia and Europe flourished, guided by agreements like the 1994 Partnership and Cooperation Agreement. This agreement sought to enhance political and economic freedoms, promote peace and security, and foster economic cooperation between the European Union, EU, and Russia. By 2005, energy had become the cornerstone of EU-Russia trade, with total trade exceeding $166 billion. That year, Russia's trade surplus reached about 8% of its GDP, roughly $50 billion. Russia became the EU's third-largest trading partner, making up 7.3% of the EU's total trade. Conversely, the EU was Russia's top trading partner, accounting for 52.9% of Russia's trade. The two regions enjoyed complementary economies, with energy-related trade accounting for roughly 65% of the EU's imports from Russia. In fact, by this time, the EU was importing about 28% of its energy needs from Russia, with certain countries relying entirely on Russian gas supplies. However, the situation changed dramatically in 2014 due to the Ukraine crisis. Russia's annexation of Crimea in March 2014 marked a major turning point in EU-Russia energy relations. In response, the EU imposed sanctions targeting key sectors of the Russian economy, including energy, finance, and defense. The sanctions aimed to limit Russia's access to European markets and advanced technologies, severely disrupting the long-standing energy partnerships between the two regions. These measures included bans on importing goods from Crimea, restrictions on investments in the region's tourism sector, and prohibitions on exporting certain energy-related equipment and technology to Russia. The objective was to prevent Russia from developing new oil and gas resources, particularly those in deep water, Arctic, and shale deposits. In retaliation, Russia sought to mitigate the impact of these sanctions by pivoting toward new energy markets, especially increasing oil and gas exports to China and other Asian countries. This strategic shift was designed to reduce Russia's economic dependence on Europe and to diversify its revenue sources. Despite these efforts, the sanctions led to a noticeable decrease in EU-Russia trade. By 2015, the EU's imports from Russia had significantly dropped, reflecting both the reduced energy imports and the broader economic impact of the sanctions. In response, the EU ramped up its efforts to diversify its energy sources, seeking to improve energy security and reduce reliance on Russian supplies. This included increasing imports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, from countries such as the United States and Qatar, as well as investing heavily in renewable energy infrastructure to support energy imports from alternative sources. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, particularly following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, led to an even sharper decline in energy trade between Russia and the EU. By the third quarter of 2024, EU imports from Russia had dropped by a staggering 86%, with petroleum oil imports falling to just 7% of the levels seen in the first quarter of 2021. This dramatic reduction has significantly impacted the EU's trade balance with Russia, with the EU's trade deficit with Russia reaching $46 billion in the second quarter of 2022, before narrowing to just $0.6 billion by the third quarter of 2024. Austria, which serves as a key hub for Russian gas exports to Europe, has faced particular challenges. OMV, an Austrian energy company, announced that Gazprom, the Russian energy giant, had halted its gas deliveries to Austria due to an ongoing arbitration dispute. This disruption has caused gas prices in the region to rise by 2.7%. This termination of Austria's relationship with Russia underscores the vulnerability of Europe's energy security and the urgent need for alternative energy supplies. With Europe bracing for what is forecasted to be the coldest winter since the beginning of the Ukraine war, the pressure on energy resources is expected to intensify. The continent is already dealing with the effects of significantly reduced Russian gas imports, and weather forecasts predict colder than usual temperatures, which will exacerbate the strain on energy systems across Europe. Germany, Europe's largest economy and one of the largest consumers of Russian gas, is particularly vulnerable. The country is expected to see a rise in heating demand, with forecasts predicting an average of 18 heating degree days in the next 6 to 10 days, 3 days higher than the 10-year seasonal average. This increase in heating demand highlights the additional pressure on Germany's energy resources as colder weather sets in. To address the looming energy crisis, Germany has taken measures such as reopening coal-fired power plants and delaying the closure of its last nuclear reactors. These steps are part of a broader strategy to secure energy supplies during the winter months. Looking ahead, one of the key challenges for Europe is the expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement at the end of 2024. Under this agreement, Russia has been supplying around 40 billion cubic meters of natural gas each year to Europe through Ukraine. The termination of this agreement could lead to further supply disruptions, particularly to Central and Eastern Europe. Ukraine's energy infrastructure, already under significant strain due to the ongoing conflict, may not be able to reliably serve as a transit route for gas, even if the agreement is extended. This uncertainty is likely to further destabilize European energy markets and complicate efforts to secure long-term energy contracts with alternative suppliers. The combination of sanctions, energy shortages, and geopolitical instability underscores the urgent need for Europe to transition to a more resilient and diversified energy system. However, achieving this goal will not be without significant challenges. As Europe works to balance immediate energy needs with its long-term sustainability goals, the path forward remains uncertain, marked by both economic and geopolitical complexities. In conclusion, the sanctions against Russia, coupled with the drastic reduction in Russian gas deliveries, have dramatically altered Europe's energy landscape. The halt of natural gas exports, which once accounted for about 40% of Europe's gas imports, has created a major supply gap, impacting global energy markets and driving up energy prices. These price spikes have placed tremendous financial burdens on both households and industries, with energy costs in many EU countries more than doubling compared to pre-crisis levels. While governments have introduced subsidies and price caps to mitigate the effects, these measures are placing a strain on national budgets. As winter approaches, fears of supply disruptions and the potential for rolling blackouts or energy rationing are growing. In response to these challenges, some European countries, such as Germany, have turned to coal and nuclear power as temporary solutions, complicating their long-term environmental goals. The expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement at the end of 2024 adds another layer of uncertainty to Europe's energy future. Without a reliable supply route through Ukraine, Europe's energy situation could worsen, especially for Central and Eastern European nations. As the conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues, Europe's energy security remains at risk, highlighting the urgent need for a more diversified and sustainable energy system. Thank you for watching. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If this content resonated with you or sparked inspiration, please consider showing your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your support is invaluable to us. Be sure to check out another video on our channel, which is now on the screen.